Well, it's 1 o'clock and it's time to go into this presentation. And I am really anticipating this talk with Graham. I've gotten to know Graham. In fact, we're going to be co-leading a Friday workshop where we're featuring the City of Calgary. And so Graham's going to give us a little more insight into their stormwater management program. So Graham, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do with the city, and then it's all yours.
Sure, thank you very much, John. I'm just trying to share my screen here. There we go. It looks like it's just loading up here. It's just a little slow. Let's try that. How's it looking? I think it's going to come up there.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, John and I were just having a last-minute panic here. For some reason, my audio kept shutting off, but I shouldn't really tell you guys the behind-the-scenes sort of panic. Just got my heart rate going a little bit there, John.
Yeah, it helps. That's how they know why they were in the waiting room so long. But I think we're all good now.
That's what stormwater awareness sometimes does to you guys, right? Especially when we're trying to make our customers aware of stormwater pollution, as we're trying to do here in Calgary. So as John said, my name's Graham Tait. I'm with the City of Calgary here in Alberta in Canada. I think we've got some people from Saskatoon joining us today, just next door in the province of Saskatchewan. Originally, I grew up in Scotland, and so I've still got a little bit of an accent. It gets a little thicker, after a couple of beers, but I haven't done that today, so you're in luck. So, but yeah, I'm a stormwater pollution prevention specialist with the City of Calgary. We have a small team of folks in similar roles that we work in what's called the water utility with the City of Calgary, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the work we've been doing here. And particularly some work we've been doing in the last few years, which is to establish an industrial, commercial, and institutional program for stormwater pollution prevention. We have had a long-running program for erosion and sediment control. In fact, in terms of the US, we've had quite a few presenters in past years, Jerry Fifield, Jennifer Hildebrandt, Dwayne Stanland. We haven't had you up. Excuse me, we haven't had you up here yet, John. But we look forward to the day you're able to make a visit to Calgary. And I just wanted to say before I forget, a huge thanks to John and Rebecca and the team at Stormwater Awareness Week for organizing this amazing event. I mean, I was delighted to hear this year the breadth and depth and the reach of it. I think what used to be the California Stormwater Awareness Week is now worldwide, I believe. So that's awesome. So we really appreciate the work you guys are doing, and also the opportunity for the City of Calgary to present here. So without further ado, I'm going to get started here. By the way, the building you saw in the slide at the start is called the Water Center. It's one of our first leadership in energy and environmental designs here in Calgary. So just across the street from me. So I was just over there enjoying lunch. Calgary's located in what we call Treaty 7 territory. And we do like to acknowledge at the start of our presentations and our meetings that we're in the Indigenous lands of the Treaty 7 people of Alberta. That includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, the Kainai First Nations. Also here, right next door to Calgary, we have the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and the Goodstoney First Nations. And the City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is District 5 and 6 here. So I'm sure quite a few of you have been to Calgary, and if not, I definitely encourage you to make a visit. Of course, we're famous for the Stampede that happens here in the summer. We also have a hockey team that I don't know if any of you have heard of, but we'll talk about stormwater here. And we're situated here at the junction or the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow rivers. And traditionally in Blackfoot, that is this location where the Blackfoot people, Blackfoot speaking people gathered, is called Mokinstis. It's basically the elbow, the confluence of what we call the Bow and the Elbow River. So those are two of our main rivers that flow right through the city here. So and this is where we strive to work together, walk together, and grow together in a good way. If anyone's interested, there is an awesome video that was put out by the Calgary Foundation, which is a local nonprofit here. It's about that land acknowledgement, and I find it really inspiring. It always brings a tear to my eye when I watch it. It's amazing. So just a little quick geography lesson here. We're located in Calgary, which is, if you're in the United States, it's kind of similar to Denver. We're in the foothills region of just east of the Rockies, just a little bit east of what we call the Eastern Slopes. So, which is important because it really has a big impact on our climate around here. Even in the winter, we have this weather pattern called Chinook, which is a warm wind that blows due to changing air pressure off the Rockies, and it can be quite nice. When you go from well, I'll talk in Celsius here, but a minus 30-degree day in Calgary in January, and all of a sudden it goes up to +5. But yeah, we're located close to the town of Banff, which is one of our mountain towns. And you can see on the map just a little bit up Highway 93 here, northwest of Banff is Bow Lake. There's a glacier up there that is part of our main water supply here through the city of Calgary. It feeds into Bow. The glacier melts into Bow Lake, which feeds into the Bow River. And so some of our objectives for today's discussion are, I'm going to talk a little bit about stormwater pollution here, just in a local context, make a bit of a case for why we started proactive inspections and education, and a little bit of compliance enforcement here in terms of stormwater pollution prevention in the industrial, institutional, commercial world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about innovating some work we did in the last couple of years to integrate some tools using geospatial tools into our, so I'm going to call industrial, commercial, institutional, ICI for short. We love acronyms here at the city, as I'm sure many of you do, and I always like to remember to explain what they are. We'll have a little bit of an inspection example, which is a video. I may have to talk through it because we did have some audio problems running the video. And then just a quick summary and a wrap up. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. I'll try to leave some time at the end. And if we do run out of time, I'll definitely take a look through these questions and try to send out some answers. So here's just an aerial view of the city of Calgary. We are a pretty large, sprawling city in the foothills, reaching out into the prairies. And I just drew these on. They're not completely 100% accurate, I'm sure, but our main river is called the Bow River. So like I said, that flows down from Bow Lake. That's the origin of the Bow River. And we also have a bunch of tributaries, some of our smaller rivers. Like I said, Calgary's named Mokinstis after it's where Indigenous people used to meet at the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow River, which is actually where what used to be called Fort Calgary is located. That's when the Northwest Mounted Police came to keep the peace, and arrest the whiskey traders and so on. And so there was a fort that was established there back in the 19th century. It's now called Confluence Park, but it's an awesome gathering place. If you join our session on Friday on the regional spotlight, Friday morning early, we'll be talking a little bit more about the area. Fish Creek is another one of our small creeks that flows into the city. And then we also have Nose Creek. I haven't named them all, but these are some of our main water bodies here in the city. We have a couple of water treatment plants. Some of you might have heard on the news that we had a huge problem here in Calgary over the summer. The big feeder main, which is a big water pipe that is kind of like a big artery that transports our drinking water from the plant up here in the north called Bears Paw, had a catastrophic failure, and it supplies about 60% plus of our drinking water to Calgarians, as well as outlying communities. and including the Tsuut'ina Nation down here in the southwest part of the city. So people really learned this summer, I hopefully anyway, about sustainability and how water as a resource, whether drinking water, the wastewater and stormwater is really facing a lot of issues here that we need to think about in terms of sustainability. And we do have three, we used to have two, we now have a third wastewater treatment plant located down along the Bow River. And in fact, this aerial image here shows just a little part of the north end of the Pine Creek water treatment plant, which is the newest one. It's got some neat stormwater low impact development stuff like green roofs. The colored lines you see here, I've just put some labels on that. Darker green line, if you can see it, is a wastewater main that's feeding it's the big trunk that comes down into the wastewater treatment plant here. Interestingly, when this plant was built a few years ago, the City of Calgary partnered with the University of Calgary, and there's a really interesting research facility here, which is putting out doing a lot of research and publishing a lot of information and papers on things like pharmaceuticals in drinking water and wastewater, for example. So there's a lot of really interesting work going on down there. These kind of contour sort of areas you see are actually streams. They're testing streams where they can look at the fate of a pharmaceutical, for instance, in wastewater. So it's really interesting what's going on down there. This is just from our geographic information system, our GIS, these layers. So you see this blue layer, that's our drinking water. So those are pipes and valves and so on. And then the lighter green color is stormwater. And a lot of that stormwater flows sometimes with some degree of treatment, like a storm pond, for example, in newer neighborhoods. But in a lot of the older areas, it drains untreated largely to the receiving environment. In this case, you can see down here the Bow River. So, and that's where this wastewater treatment plant is located. But that's just an example. As the water utility, those are the three different types of water that we're responsible for managing. So in a bigger sort of context, in terms of the watershed, Calgary's, like I said, is located along the Bow River, which flows from the mountains, from the eastern slopes of the Rockies. North of us, about 3 hours drive, is the city of Edmonton, and they have a river called the North Saskatchewan River. And the Bow River combines with a river called the Red Deer. It becomes the South Saskatchewan. It flows through Saskatoon here. And so it's important to think too in terms of stormwater pollution prevention that we are always living upstream of our neighbors and also downstream of our neighbors. So a regional effort at stormwater pollution prevention, even at a watershed scale, is sometimes important. I'm going to talk today a little bit about our stormwater pollution prevention team. As I mentioned, we provide various lines of service, including erosion sediment control. I'm going to be talking mostly about our ICI program today. Just for our friends in Saskatoon there, if you're joining us, I wanted to post a couple of pictures. My wife's side of the family is from Prince Albert area, so we go out to this beautiful lake every summer. It's called Emma Lake. It's a couple hours north of Saskatoon, but I did take my bike this summer and ride around the beautiful pathways in Saskatoon, and this is a view of the South Saskatchewan River as it flows through the city. It's just gorgeous. So there you go, Saskatoon folks. I thought I would make mention there. So stormwater awareness, I think that's why we're all here. It's really important. And I think, as Joe, one of the presenters, mentioned yesterday, it's really where we've seen some good strides in terms of sustainability. I'm currently doing a course in environmental communication, and I've been reading this book by Hogan. It's called Do the Right Thing, PR Tips for a Skeptical Public, produced by Capital Books. And Hogan's website is here. It's actually a really interesting read if you're working in the realm of stormwater pollution prevention and trying to plan how you're going to work effectively with industries and facilities and your colleagues if you work in a municipality. So I think what's key here in our program is that first and foremost, the City of Calgary is doing the right thing. And then secondary to that is seen to be doing the right thing, just in terms of having an effective program. So that's my first tip of the day. The city here in Calgary, we're in part of a zone that's like we call it Hailstorm Alley. We suffer from a lot of bad hailstorms here. Usually once every year or two, one little region of the city or sometimes a larger area gets hit by hailstorms. We had one just last month in early August, and it caused a lot of damage. Currently, the price tag is about $2.8 billion. I'm not sure what that is in US dollars. It's anyways, it's probably about 2.2 million US dollars just for one storm that lasted, probably for about an hour. It roared through the city and took siding off of homes and caused a lot of vehicle damage and also caused a lot of localized flooding caused by stormwater. And once all the hail started melting, the Jasper wildfire you probably heard about too, north of Banff there, north of the Bow Lake is the town of Jasper, and it was partially devastated. About a third of the town was burned in a wildfire this summer. It was just awful to see. But when you look at this data is from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and this has been quite an incredible year in terms of insurance claims. And you can generally tie quite a bit of that to climate change. We really are affected by, you can see it by the decade or even by the year, the impacts of climate change around here. And so just as an example, this is from a colleague of mine, Bert Van Doon, who some of you might know. He's a great guy. He works in stormwater with us here at the city. He's very knowledgeable. And he just produced this information showing, I won't go into too much detail here, but it's basically what it's showing is for a 1 hour rainfall event in the Calgary region back about 25, 27 years ago. What used to be the rainfall amount, about 52 mils, we're a pretty semi-arid place, and that would have been equivalent to about a 500-year return period for us. As we move into more climate change, we are seeing, towards the 2050s, not that far from now, that return period could be reduced to 100 years. So we are trying to, oh, by the way, you see this photo at the bottom. This is actually from a hailstorm in Calgary, where it's literally ripped the siding off homes, and it looks like a winter storm, but it's right in the middle of the summer. So it's something we've been trying to consider in terms of our stormwater pollution prevention, our ICI work, and our erosion sediment control. We had a city group here in Calgary recently at the facility I work at. They actually did a climate adaptation and resiliency assessment, and the discussion about stormwater in that assessment was almost missed. And luckily, somebody said, "Hey, what about stormwater?" And you're getting more pollutants building up in these droughty periods, more intense rain events, and there's a lot more potential for pollutants, sediments, nutrients, and so on to be carried off into the stormwater system and downstream. So in terms of regulations, I mean, we're really not all that dissimilar from the United States, for example, and I'm not sure where everybody on the call is calling in from today. But over the years, I've become quite familiar with the US requirements, starting with the Clean Water Act and the permitting and on down through the state and local level. Here in the City of Calgary, we actually have an approval and authorization that's granted from our provincial government. So the government of Alberta, which is our provincial government, they have provincial legislation called the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. And as part of that act, and since they basically oversee municipalities under their legislation, we have an approval to operate our stormwater system, our wastewater system in the city. So we're kind of similar to that sort of municipal separate stormwater system type approach. And so the regulators at the provincial and federal level tend to take a an end of pipe sort of approach or in stream. They might not necessarily be that interested in going to a facility that's a source of pollutants. They might hold the city accountable for pollutants, even if they're caused by a third party that's discharging into our stormwater system, for example. So that's important to be aware of because it does create a need for us as a municipality to develop and implement stormwater pollution prevention programs, which is where we're basically at today. And over the last 20 years or so, I've been working at the city. And some of you, especially in the US, I think, increasingly facilities, industrial, commercial facilities, for example, have water quality limits that are set for stormwater. This is an example here of something similar in Alberta, where the province has things, basically has approvals under that IPIA, we call it, the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. And so they've created, for this facility you see in this aerial photo up here, we have a large oil and gas industry here in Alberta, and there's a couple of large terminal distribution facilities located here in the southeast industrial part of the city. So you can see all these large tanks here. And off to the left of this aerial image, you see these two ponds. You can see a pond that's slightly cleaner, and that's actually connected. If you recall, that green layer is our stormwater system. So they typically keep this pond. They have a valve that allows water to drain out, and they keep it closed. And then they have to meet these water quality limits. So they have to be below all of these numbers here for things like chloride, total suspended solids, before they can discharge water into the storm system. And so we work closely with that facility and the Alberta government. But these tend to be few and far between. There's the vast majority of facilities do not fall under an approval. So that creates a little bit of a gap. And one thing we've tried to do in our program is work effectively, especially with our provincial regulators, which are called Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. So you can see an example here, a couple of photos I've added. The one at the top is actually where we did a joint inspection with Alberta Environment and Protected Areas at a local auto recycling facility. We were having a few problems with this facility at the time, and they've since done some significant work to remove potential stormwater pollutants from getting into the storm system. But at the time, they were draining all of their vehicle fluids, for example, into an open tank under this car here. And it was a fire hazard and a real risk of pollutants being spilled and running off the site. So we've done quite a bit of work to do joint inspection with those regulators, and they also have what's called the environmental hotline. So there's a 1-800 number you can call. I call it a lot. I think they know me on a first name basis, and report spills, and that gets it into their system. They also have a reporting if it's going into fish habitat, for instance. They will notify the federal regulators. So they're typically called Fisheries and Oceans Canada or Environment and Climate Change Canada. They are fairly short-staffed here in the Calgary area, but we have worked with the federal regulators on some joint work. So the relations generally go pretty well. But I wanted to point out the difference between a guidelines type approach and sometimes the need for standards or limits. And that is sometimes a challenge we have here in Calgary. Like I said, the regulators provincially and federally tend to take a little bit more of an end of pipe viewpoint. That's where it's entering the environment is where they're most interested. So last year we released finally a strategy called the Stormwater Management Strategy, which addresses some of these issues as well as takes a more holistic approach to stormwater management in the Calgary area. I think because we're doing this over Zoom and it's turning into a YouTube video, you probably won't be able to click on this link, but if you're interested, you can certainly search up City of Calgary Stormwater Management Strategy. It's really quite well, like I said, it's holistic and it's well integrated and it's at the corporate level. So it's not just the water utility here, water services, that's responsible for it. We work with a number of what we call business units and departments and other folks to implement the strategy. Interestingly, one of the things in the strategy in the next couple of years is that we're going to start requiring certain facilities or sectors to start having to develop stormwater pollution prevention plans in the industrial and commercial world. Currently, we're quite effective at that in the construction world with erosion and sediment control, but we've got a long ways to go. So that's something that we're currently working on, which is quite exciting. We do have a bylaw. Some of you would call it an ordinance, I believe. One of our bylaws here is the stormwater bylaw, and it gets updated every few years. We do have some wording in the bylaw, for example, that talks about the term we use is prohibited substance or prohibited substances. So anything other than relatively clean stormwater, if it conveys anything else from a site, such as high TSS, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, for example, we can take enforcement action under our stormwater bylaw. Our fines, I'm sure if we compare them to the US, are really quite small, to put it mildly. One thing we've been more effective with recently is if we do find a polluter, initially we might try to work with them, educate them, let them know what the problem is, but we have often gone to the extent of, if we incur costs to clean out our stormwater system to respond to a spill, we will do basically a claims process through our law department. And those claims, as you can imagine, can add up to quite a significant cost. So we've found that sometimes to be more effective. For example, releasing a prohibited material into the stormwater system has a specified fine of $3,000. That's $3,000. It's not a whole lot, especially if someone pleads guilty and we have to go through the whole court process and go and testify and everything. So there's the process of doing claims is what we've been using quite a bit in the past few years. It's been quite effective. So like I said before, also the city doing the right thing and to be seen to be doing the right thing is important. And we do take an education first approach. One thing we discovered from a survey we did a few years ago is that the majority of the population in Calgary, if you went out on the street or called businesses and you asked them, what does the word stormwater mean to you? The majority of people would have a difficult time answering that. And furthermore, they're generally, most people that we deal with, like what we call our customers, are generally not that familiar with stormwater and the fact that they're literally sitting in our watershed with their feet kind of in the water. And especially if they have storm inlets, storm drains, catch basins at their facility, or if water can run over land and get into our system. So we spend a lot of our days having those kind of discussions. Also, here's just a few examples of where we were at a few years ago and still some of the situations we sometimes come across. More in the world of construction, we have issues with sites. We have a lot of areas of Calgary that are like very fine-grained soils, like really silty kind of soils. So not even a lot of clay, just like silty type post-glacial soils. So you tend to get a lot of erosion of silty material, and it quickly gets transported downstream as runoff concentrates. This example here is actually on a local project a few years ago. We were having some huge compliance issues with this project, getting them to comply with erosion and sediment control requirements. And we actually worked with one of our teams. They're called Water Quality Monitoring. And they've been working for the last 20 years or so on our total loadings management plan, helping support that and identifying sources of pollutants getting into our rivers, as well as how best practices are functioning. So they provide a lot of technical expertise in terms of monitoring. They're out there every day of the week deploying monitoring equipment. So we asked their team if they could help us set up one of these auto samplers. And then we waited on a big rain event. And you can see just a few of the bottles from the rain event. This is the bottle on the left on the bottom slide there is right at the start of the event, or close to the start, when you get that big first flush of sediment coming through. And this rain event lasted about an hour. So about 3 hours later, there was still a bit of runoff coming through, but you can see at the bottom of the bottle what's settled out is significantly less TSS. But yeah, that's about a 1 liter volume of water in that bottle, and you can see how much sediment. So it was, to put it mildly, it was a huge problem dealing with this site. We did actually use this data to put a claim forward to clean out one of our storm ponds that was absolutely filled with sediment over a couple of years, to about the tune of $1 million, $1 million. So that kind of work was really effective at getting the message out. A few years ago, if you see the photo in the top center there, this is one of our, I think this is our oldest storm pond in the city. It's one of these old traditional storm ponds. It's just a single cell pond. Somebody from our operations team called and said the pond had turned bright orange. I'm not sure how well the color shows up on your screen, but literally this pond is bright orange. There's a sign that I've kind of whited out here. It's an outfall sign. It just says the number of the stormwater outfall. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So we actually ended up having to take this water. We tested it quickly for toxicity to send it to one of our wastewater treatment plants as an emergency. It passed for toxicity, but we definitely didn't want this water draining out of the pond down into the environment. And so we determined after much work, going up the branch network of the stormwater system, that there was actually a metal plating business that had all kinds of lack of best practices going on, lots of bad practices, drains that were hidden under tanks and so on. And lo and behold, they had a discharge of acids and heavy metals. There was a lot of chromium and nickel and so on in this water. So it was a little bit of a disaster, and we did the best effort we could to get it under control. If you join our session on Friday, there's a colleague that's joining me, Reed. He's going to talk a little bit about microplastics. Some of you in big urban areas have probably seen these plastics, especially if you have like what Calgary does, the plastics industry, where we have companies that take fossil fuels and turn it into polyethylene pellets, for example, and resins and so on. So these are sort of plastics that go into the linear sort of production chain of making plastics. And if you look at these little microplastic pellets, I think the Aussies call them noodles. They really easily get into the stormwater system. They're like little ball bearings that float, and they bounce along in the stormwater. And lo and behold, they end up downstream. And this is an example down near an outfall that's literally inundated. You can see all these multicolored microplastics. So we had a huge problem with that. And all of these examples, I think, are pretty good visual examples of stormwater pollutants. But of course, there's also a lot of invisible pollutants, dissolved metals, and other constituents that can get in stormwater. So these ones are kind of nice to show on a presentation. But raising the awareness about stormwater and what all of you are doing this week is really important, as well as wet weather inspection, getting some sampling incorporated into some of these facilities, and making sure they have best practices. So the good news with that industrial plastics example, just at the end of the slide there, this is what it used to look like. We went upstream and we discovered we had these plastics manufacturing facilities that just really had a lack of any kind of practices whatsoever. You can see the photo at the top left here, for example, is in the middle of these railroad tracks coming into the facility is absolutely covered in plastic pellets. And some of the other photos demonstrate the same thing. So we brought it to the attention of these companies, and we told them they were going to be fined under our stormwater bylaw. We also got the provincial and federal regulators involved, and they do have some pretty large fines. You could be talking $1 million+ a day for these microplastics getting downstream. So the companies quickly got on board, and as it stands today, they've got some of the best stormwater pollution prevention practices of any type of facilities around the city. I just put a couple of slides on here at the right-hand side, 2023. This was from some inspection work last year around some rail cars, and they've got good signage and good cleanup. There's also a local nonprofit or a provincial nonprofit called Alberta Plastics Recycling Association. that stepped in, and they were really helpful. There's a program that they had ownership at the time on called Operation Clean Sweep, which some of you might have heard of. It's a worldwide program that you see in a lot of developed countries to deal with plastics pollution. Oh, and we also, as a result of that, we did some work last year with a large city in Australia, as well as a microplastics pollution nonprofit in Australia. One of the researchers there got a hold of us. So it just goes to show that we've all got similar problems, and when we work together, we can really make a difference. And so we also do quite a bit of work here at our city facilities. The example in the photo is a bin that's used for hazardous waste disposal from some of our fleet maintenance facilities, as well the fire department and other field groups that go out and do a spill cleanup, for example, or even for city vehicles if there's a spill, like a bus or a garbage truck or whatever has a hydraulic fluid spill, there's a cleanup. The material is bagged and it's brought to this bin here for hazardous waste disposal. I don't have a photo of the old bin, but yeah, the old bin used to be a little scary. It had large, heavy plastic lids on it, and 90% of the time the lids would be open. So when we would have rainfall or snowfall, all the water would accumulate in the bottom of the bin. If the bin wasn't completely watertight, it would leak out of there with all the other contaminants. So we did quite a bit of work and discussion, a relatively low cost thing in the grand scheme of things to replace this bin. I love this bin now. It's got great signage, and it's got a lid that's actually like a soft closed lid. And now I want to open the lid to take a photo of it, but the lids are always closed now. So yeah, you've taken a source of stormwater pollution getting into the bin, and you've removed it. And our waste and recycling folks who pick up the bin and take it away for hazardous waste disposal are now not going to turn around and say, we're not removing the bin, it's full of rainwater. So like I said, sometimes the most common sense practices are the best, right? In part, thanks to the US EPA, we found some great information as we were trying to develop some of our content here at the City of Calgary for our ICI program. And a lot of these concepts, like keeping a tidy site, minimizing exposure, are taken from concepts or ideas that the US EPA and even at the state and local level, and in the kind of presentations you see here this week. There's really a lot of good messaging on that. And as the old saying goes, a picture says 1,000 words. So we prepared this and put it on our website, which I've got a link to a little bit later. There is a QR code you can click on, or also at the bottom, calgary.ca/ we call it STMPP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention. We just wanted to do something different. So yeah, thanks to the US EPA and to all of you really for delivering stormwater awareness to such diverse audiences is what we deal with. And also here's a special thanks to Jonah Sonner. I really love this presentation. Just give a little plug for it. It's back in 2016, so it's a few years ago. I'm not sure if there's an updated one, but I actually heard about this Stormwater Awareness Week through my friend John McCullough in California. And I started signing up for these sessions as much as I could every year. So it's a small world, and it's really cool just to connect with all of you. But I took some of the concepts that Jonah explains in his video from 2016 and applied them to one of our local facilities just next door to me here. They built a new facility a few years ago. It's called our salt management facility. Calgary's a winter city, and we use a lot of salt. Unfortunately, we try to be fairly judicious in how we use it. But nonetheless, it's one of these sort of balancing acts between public safety, driver safety, and trying to do stormwater pollution prevention. And in fact, this facility used to make a product that they would store outside that used to drive me crazy. It's called pickle. So it's basically it's kind of like a pickled sort of gravel material. They pickle it with about 10% salt. And a lot of the material they use on the roads here, it's what we would call pea gravel. It's a small gravel about the size of green peas, you can probably picture, are a little bit smaller. And in order to stop the piles freezing and to have a little bit of salt in the product as the snow and ice control product, they add salt, and they used to store it all outdoors. And there was a huge point source of chlorides, getting into the storm system. Again, you can see the green layer here, and there's storm system all around the site. So what they did was they built a state-of-the-art salt storage building that is resistant to corrosion. And next door, they put up another building that's used to manufacture the pickle, and they've got enough. It's a huge building. It's a big kind of Quonset structure, and inside here, the pickle is stored indoors. So, I mean, that's a bigger cost, obviously, but now you've got way more effective stormwater pollution prevention. There's still a few issues when the loaders come out of the site. I go out there quite a few times a year and chat with the operators and try to make sure they're doing a good job in terms of cleaning the yard up. There's a little bit of a area here where the trucks that come in for hot asphalt there's an asphalt plant next door here. It's not the best setup. It's something I'm trying to get changed, where they drop some of this liquid. It tends to drip out of the back of the trucks. It's basically it's a sort of oil-based material that stops asphalt from sticking to the truck beds. So sometimes it's a challenge, dealing with if you're working in a municipality, dealing with other departments or your colleagues to get change. But keep up the good work. You'll get there eventually. So like I said, I love the video by Jonah Sonner there, mapping your site, creating a compliant site map. We take quite a bit of this, and as well as some of the US EPA stuff. And now we have a tool on our website where people can create their own site map and build it into a SWPPP, basically. How are we doing for time? I better speed up here. So just getting more into some of our geospatial stuff. Myself and my colleague, Parker, who I think might be on the call today, we did quite a bit of work this past summer dealing with an oil spill at one of our stormwater ponds in the city. This pond that you see a little bit of here in the photo on the top right is a pond that was built a little bit on a sort of postage stamp size site, but it's really effective, actually. It's been incredible, this pond. We'll learn a little bit more about this type of pond. It's a multi-cell pond that it also incorporates some nature-based like wetlands and so on. And it's literally capturing a lot of pollutants that were going directly into the Bow River before. I've put a little bit of a map up here on the left, and you can see the drainage area. It's outlined in blue here. And it's a huge area. I forgot to write down what size it is, but it's a good chunk of the southeast part of the city. And I am sitting right up here at the top end here at what we call Manchester Centre. It's where the water centre is, talking to you guys. And this is just a small part of the whole catchment area. And the stormwater ultimately drains down here. It now goes through this pond. At least some of the lower flow events, the pond's effective at capturing it. And so back in the spring, we had this oily substance. We took samples, and it turned out to be motor oil. And it led to a whole project that my colleague Parker and I did through the summer here. Subsequent to that, I put a picture up here on the slide that shows this chamber. It's a chamber looking into the storm system. There's a large storm main that runs through here, and there's a structure called a skimming weir. It's just basically a concrete weir that can skim product off the top of the weir in this industrial area. And one day back here in the summer, it was filled with this red colored substance. The first thing I thought of was Breaking Bad, but I guess maybe somewhat fortunately it didn't turn out. It turned out to be these are the samples that we're submitting to our lab here, where we have an awesome accredited lab that's part of our division here. And they did all the analysis on all these different models. You can see actually the product is floating at the top of this 4-liter plastic jug here. And so I came back to the office after our spill response, and I thought, I wonder what that is. Is it transmission fluid, power steering fluid? And so we have a state-of-the-art kind of open scan GC mass spectrometer at the lab that runs the analysis, and it references a library of possible products and chemicals, and sure enough, it came back as transmission fluid. So that sort of raised up the ante in terms of trying to find the problem here. And one thing we used, effectively, we went around a lot of these automotive facilities, as I'll explain here. And at first, people were sort of blasé. They weren't really that interested. What's the city doing here? What do you guys want now? You know, we had an inspector here from the fire department last week. So what we did was we took some of these photos and laminated them, 8.5 by 11 size photos, and we brought them with us. So when people would ask, "But what's the purpose of your visit? We have good practices here. We're not causing any spills or anything." We would show them the photos, and then we would use this saying. I don't know where it originated, but I learned it from Dwayne Stemlin with Minnesota DOT. He's an awesome guy. I love Dwayne. And it's basically, who wants swimmable, fishable, drinkable water? Dwayne does a lot better job of it than me. Raise your hand if you want one or more of these. We got people thinking, you know, in the auto sector at these facilities about what kind of impact they might have. So what we did was we went around and mapped a bunch of these facilities. We used our city business licensing data. We looked up automotive facilities. It wasn't 100% effective, but initially we came up with a map, and I think Parker was going to cover these purple ones here, and I was going to go out and look at the green ones. That's kind of how we had it set up initially. Like I said, the data wasn't maybe 100% accurate. But then we also use this tool called pictometry. So we have this awesome tool in our GIS system here. There's a company called EagleView that I'm assuming a number of cities use a service like this or similar to it, where they fly this high resolution aerial imagery. The incredible thing about this imagery is it gets updated. Like, they fly it every year. In fact, I think this is September. There you go, September 25th, 2023. Exactly a year ago, this image is, they might be out there on today, you know, flying new images. The cool thing about this is you can click on this little compass and you get this oblique sort of image where it's looking at it at a 45-degree angle, and you can change the direction north, south, east, west. So we started, Parker and I started doing this kind of work where we were doing a little bit of an initial assessment. Oh, it looks like there's an automotive facility here. It looks like they've got some outdoor storage. What is going on here? It looks like a lot of drums with some potential spills. And then, you know, we can look to see what access they have to our stormwater system. So we did this kind of pre-assessment work. And then, like I say, we went out there and we used the laminated photos to explain to people if they weren't really buying our story right away. So we sort of framed it using some of the city language. The Bow River, if you recall, we've used terms like the Bow is below, or we're a big city on a small river. I guess people thinking about swimmable, fishable, drinkable water. And we went out initially as we were building our geospatial database and started doing these inspections. Here at this facility, we found these 4 drums were full of antifreeze and there's no secondary containment. So that was a good conversation. And the company was ultimately, very quickly, they got into compliance in terms of moving them into a covered, secured area with proper spill trays. So I talked about the laminated photos. And again, we just used some of our mapping here. This blue area with the blue outline is that stormwater catchment. And as we built this geospatial database, I'm just going to talk about it real quickly. We started to populate it. These circles and dots you see are different stages of inspection. This was a few months ago, and we've made some quite amazing progress through this area. The bulk of the facilities here, 100 plus or so, we've done inspections, sometimes multiple inspections on. And so what Parker, I have to give him most of the credit here, and I do see he's sitting here in the background. He did a lot of work over the last couple of years to develop these geospatial tools for us. And it's using Esri basically as the GIS kind of platform, and basically just leveraging existing information data sets we have in GIS technology. So the work that Parker did initially was to develop it for our erosion and sediment control, our construction SWPPP sort of program. And we've since like made really good progress in terms of the development and implementation in our ICI inspection and compliance program. This is just a little slide I put together. This is me here on a better day, and in terms of our erosion sediment control back pre-COVID, I guess, if we want to use that timeline. Prior to 2020, we used to have all these paper files. So our office, we still have quite a few of these. These are all erosion and sediment control or construction SWPPP plans, if you like. And why we generated a lot of paper. And anytime we would ask for a change to a plan, more paper was produced. And then we would bring the paper out to site with us. Back post-COVID and through COVID, we started working on this geospatial system where we've gone much more digital now. So we can go all the way from reviewing an erosion sediment control plan right through to inspections as the project is developed and tracking those inspections, and it all goes into the one database. So I'm not sure how many of you are using something similar. There's probably quite a few of you out there who are. I just put up this image real quickly for ESC, erosion sediment control. But you can see these areas that are shaded. These are all shape files that are put in by our staff as we get plans in. And of course, there's quite a bit of development in terms of subdivision development around the periphery of the city, especially in the north and south ends here. There's quite a bit of rapid growth going on. So you can basically open up all these layers on this mapping tool here. So, and this is just me out on site doing an ESC inspection. I felt like they could have used some more slope breaks here for sure, folks. You know, the hydroseed application, this is at the tail end of winter. Everything looks really brown in Calgary at that time of year. Pretty good hydroseeding application and some blanket down here. But yeah, what's going on with the slope breaks? I don't know. So what we did just briefly in the last few minutes is what I'll do is I'll send this to John. This is really the last slide here, and it's not. I don't think it's going to play well anyway because we had some problems with the sound. But what I'll do is I'll just YouTube this to you guys. But it's just an example of how we took that approach and we applied it to doing inspections. I would have to go through it all and do the sound here, so I'm going to try to skip it here and jump to the summary. But yeah, that's just really, I guess, my summary of key things is if you work in a municipality, whether you're in Canada or the US or another country, I think a lot of the time we're at ground zero when it comes to preventing these end-of-pipe stormwater discharges and putting much more focus on source control. And I talked a little bit about how we're a little bit all over the map. It's a little bit different in Canada versus the US in terms of regulations, standards and limits and so on. But even not considering that, communication obviously is key. So I think what we can learn from this week, especially, is just get some good tips and tricks from our colleagues as to how to frame the problem, tell the story effectively, and support best management practices. It's a key skill that we need to do as stormwater professionals. And of course, we need to, if we're working in a municipal realm, we need to incorporate this first and foremost at our municipal facilities. So that's I think where we're at here in Calgary, and I put a little bit of contact information here. Feel free to send me an email if you're in the area and you want to talk about stormwater. Look us up. Now I'm going to get maybe 200 emails from people. But yeah, that's it, John. I think I'm going to unshare my screen here.
Well, thank you very much. And we do have a few minutes. Is there anyone who would like to unmute? Make a comment, a question about what Graham just presented. And Graham, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive look at your stormwater management program. And yes, it is confirming that, you know, we're dealing with similar issues in many different diverse locations. And that's what this week is about, is seeing our commonalities and our common challenges. Anyone like to vocalize a question or comment? All right. Well, if not, Graham, you had your contact information there on the screen so they can get a hold of you. And then I had mentioned that we will upload a PDF copy of your notes onto the Stormwater Awareness Week resource page. So
I see one question there at the bottom, I think, John.
Oh, okay. There. Do you have any regulations for construction projects within Calgary, or mainly focus on municipal? I think you talked about this early on, so it may be someone who came in a little bit later, but maybe recap that.
Yeah, sure. And I would also suggest, I forgot to mention it, but you'll see once the video comes out of the presentation, you'll see that QR code that you can click on, or you can go to calgary.ca/STMPP. It's a little harder to remember, but when you get to that page, you'll see we've split it into 3 categories currently. We have a pretty comprehensive list of requirements for erosion and sediment control for construction sites. We haven't quite got into the more sort of holistic stormwater pollution prevention plan approach that in construction. It's still a little bit separated here. Construction projects, we do erosion sediment control. So just real quickly through our permitting process, when a developer or even the city wants to develop a project, be it a subdivision or a roadway or an LRT trackway or whatever, they typically have to submit an erosion and sediment control plan. So more or less like a SWPPP. And then we have a couple of our staff that review that. And then we have a few staff, about 3 or 4 folks that will go out once that plan is approved and do inspections, like a compliance inspection. Make sure that they've got the proper practices in place for the various stages of the plan. Probably we are quite successful in terms of working with the development industry and city projects. I would say one of our biggest challenges still is at the home building stage. There's some home builders are good and they implement good practices, on home building lots. But if you come to Calgary and drive around subdivisions, it's an area that definitely needs improvement. So that's something we're working on. So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, there is a lot of information if you take a look at the website under the erosion sediment control part.
It sounds like your construction program is more managed on the municipal level than the provincial or what we would call the state level.
That's correct. Yeah, we actually, a number of years back, the provincial government for their big transportation projects released their first erosion sediment control guidelines. So I don't want to say the city was ahead, but we did. We were probably one of the first cities in Canada. Maybe some of the history of it was the federal government at some point, I think, maybe interrogated one of our city employees. This was back before my time in the late 90s. But and then the end of pipe kind of approach that I mentioned that the federal and provincial regulators were taking, that really led us to pay notice, and since by the way, our wastewater and our stormwater systems are entirely separate, and they were always kind of built that way over the last 125 years or so. But that led us to pay more attention to our stormwater management, and then we'll kind of come full circle. And if any of you are joining on Friday, we have a couple of great guests that are joining to talk.
All right. Well, that's a great lead in because we're out of time, but we get to continue this Friday morning. So be sure, if you haven't registered yet, be there. And we got some great things, even some video footage that I think you're going to really enjoy. So we'll see you all Friday. Unfortunately, we have to log off now so we can get to our next workshops. But thank you, Graham, so much. Great presentation.
Thank you, everybody. Take care and reach out if you got questions.